Are we on, Cliff? Can you hear me fine? Well, welcome everybody. We're going to go ahead and attempt to start our meeting. And we always like to start our meeting with a prayer. We like to ask God's blessing on the meeting. So if we could kind of stand up. And Pastor Tom Herzog pastors the Faith Bible Church in Broadus. And he attends our Patriot meeting once in a while. So I sent Pastor Tom a text. And I asked him if he was coming to the meeting, and he said he was. And I said, well, can I hire you to do the prayer and the pledge? And he said, no, you cannot hire me. But he said, I will be happy to do the prayer and the pledge. So, Pastor Tom, if I could give you the microphone. Thank you.
Greg doesn't know what he's getting into with the preacher with the mic in his hand. So, hey, thanks for being here. It's great to see the community. I grew up here, grew up in Miles City, and I've been in Broadus now for 17 years in the church there. But when he said the prayer and the pledge, I wanted to bring this out. And I don't know how much this gets talked about, but I remember growing up out in the valley and went to Kircher School. And one of our teachers, I'm not sure which one it was, instilled in us the importance of when you say the pledge, it is one nation under God. It is not one nation, pause, under God. It is one nation under God. And so we keep those words together. So I might catch you off guard with that part, but I wanted to impress upon us that importance, because then as I looked up here at the mission, and we see right up there, a faith-based organization, what a blessing that we have the Lord over us and in front of us and behind us. And that is the reason, hopefully, that we do everything that we do.
Amen.
Amen. And so right now we will open with a word of prayer, and then we will follow with our Pledge of Allegiance. Let's pray together, shall we? Beloved God, we are honored to get to come together as a group of men and women who are interested in the topics that affect our community and our country, and God, ultimately our world. So as we do so, we pray for discerning minds. We pray for wisdom that is guided by your Spirit. And we pray that we would have a joyful and educational opportunity here to not miss, but to fully grasp. And so bless each one that's here tonight. Bless those who still might be coming and dealing with all the struggles of cold weather. Right now, God, we give this time to you, and we ask your blessing on it in the beloved name of Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Why don't we turn over our flag and let us do that together and pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Pastor Tom, and have a seat. And I just have when you have an organization, a little group, there are just a few things you've got to just do every meeting. So kind of bear with me. But we're excited to have you all here tonight. And as we discuss and understand a really important really important topic that affects every one of us, and that is energy, because we cannot live at all without it. And I would like to wish you all a very Merry Christmas. And we've got some goodies over here. And as the program continues, you're more than welcome. No, none of the speakers will mind if you go get a cup of coffee and a cookie. And you guys could even do that, Alan, if you want. So help yourself to that.
And hot cocoa. Hot cocoa, too.
I don't know. And we're privileged to have Lisa Bennett here. And she's back there, and she's got a whole table full of great Christmas gifts that you could buy and give to your friends and your family. Is that kind of how it's going, Lisa? Did I forget anything?
Just that the proceeds go to the Patriot Roundtable.
What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? Well, thank you very much. And always in our Patriot meetings, we like to do this. If you're an elected official, or if you're running for office, or if you're a past elected official, we would like you to stand and introduce yourself and tell just a little bit about yourself and your office, and do a little campaigning. But so if you're one of those, if I could just get you all to stand up so people could see you, and of all the people here, I probably know Dennis Teskey the best. Could you just kind of start the ball rolling, Dennis, and then everybody can kind of follow?
Hi, I'm Dennis Teskey, Prairie County. You hear it? Not yet? There, I'm sorry. Dennis Teskey, Prairie County resident, Prairie County commissioner, Prairie County farmer. We are currently dealing with wind projects in our county. Some people love them because it's just going to be so much money. It is huge, and they're willing to throw neighbors under buses to get that money. And other folks, my concern with my residents in my county is one set of folks that sign leases. They have rights on their property. God love them. I have rights on mine, and I want them to have their rights. But what they don't have is the right to go on another neighbor's property as these wind projects bleed over. Keep your distance. In our county right now, we're looking at type 1 zoning, or citizens come to us, 75% of them desiring this, and I think that's an important yes, vote for me.
Well, thank you, Dennis, and it's a privilege to be next to Solid County Commissioner. I'm Jerry Schoenberg. I represent House District 34. I'm from Circle, grew up in Vida. We still farm in the Vida area. I get to farm with my son and daughter-in-law, two of my sons, although one of them's in Helena doing a CPA most of the time, but and the grandkids out on the farm, so I'm really fortunate for that, and the good people of House District 34 have elected me to represent them in Helena, and I'm thankful for that, and made a lot of amazingly good friends in the whole process too, and I just appreciate anyone that reaches out and asks questions, gives suggestions, and there's lots of issues that we need schooling on, so thank you.
Well, Jerry didn't talk long enough, I don't think, so I'll take a little of his time. and tell you, I'm Jeff Pattison, so I'm running for Public Service Commission up by Glasgow Valley County area there. So it's a big district. It runs from Cutbank to Sydney to Ekalaka around Billings, and comes back up through Great Falls and Cascade there. So Jerry served in the legislature, had my seat on appropriations, chairing natural resources. And he's done a very, very noble job. And when he said that he responds back, he does. So I talked with him several times, and I couldn't be prouder to have somebody like him take a seat that I had and took pride in myself. I have some brochures over here on the side there, and tells a little bit about me if you want to know more. I'm putting together a website called PattисonForMontana.com, and usually on Tuesdays, the Public Service Commission has a work session, so you can call in and chisel on Northwest if you want to. I think it's fun, so. I serve with Alan in the legislature, so we're long, hard friends. We can joke at each other and still go have a refreshment later on. So anyhow, that's who I am and what I'm doing, and it's been traveling the state and meeting people. It's been kind of great. So.
I'm Lee Deming. I'm from Laurel, House District 54, and privileged to serve with these other legislators here. I've had a blast. You know, one of the things I didn't anticipate in the legislature was the depth of friendship that you make, and just about anybody but Greg had asked me to come up here, I probably would have done it, but we've been good friends for quite a while. I'm a pro-life guy, and I went to the legislature to try to save babies, and we got one passed. I think we do that, but my gosh, it's still a good fight. We're going to keep doing that. I came up here to hear about energy, but really stuck into the school funding interim commission. Please don't ask me anything about that for at least a couple of months until we get something going on that. But that has been very time-consuming, very important work. I also prime sponsor for the Defend the Guard bill. If anybody has any questions about that, later on, I'd be happy to answer any of that. Not really my signature stuff, but it's one of the most important bills I think that we introduced in the legislature. Anyway, I run for my third term coming up this next election, so thank you for having me, and again, I appreciate serving.
Hey everyone, good evening. I'm Jody Eshart from House District 51 in Central Billings. I'm just happy to say that Command Master Chief Forsett, my nephew, drove me here, so I had one of the best drivers in Montana. Get me safely to Miles City to be with Senator Kmet. I'm very honored to serve with all these people, and I would say drill, baby, drill. Let's get some nuclear energy going in Montana. Let's get more coal going on in Montana. All of the above. Except for maybe wind, I'm not really sure I like wind all that much. But with everybody here just talking, I'll say just quickly, my focus in the legislature and my past work history is trying to make medical care more accessible and cheaper for the people in the state of Montana. So thanks everybody.
I have one more person to add. Our very good family friend Linda Holland from Scobie has filed to run for House, and so
nice.
I did want to put a yahoo in for Linda because she has come to an awful lot of our Patriot meetings. When you enter, there's a sign-up sheet at the front. If you would like to get on our mailing list, please make yourself available for that. If you're not getting our messages of upcoming meetings, please let us know, and we'll fix that. We formed the Patriot Roundtable group 3 years ago, and we vocalized our mission statement as the following: a conservative, faith-based organization dedicated to educating and informing the public on relevant issues. What that really means is we have no rules. We can talk about anything we want, and we have talked about some pretty wild subjects, and we really appreciate the help that we have tonight staying on the platform, and we'll get to those introductions here in a minute. But our committee is made up of a few of us, and if you would stand when I mention your name, my favorite wife, Alice, is on the committee, and if you would stand, Alice Jobaholler, Gwen Logan is not here, Cliff Cisco, Rennie Perks, Christy Cruz, and Lauren Murray Heinbach, and Linda Wolf. So that is the committee that makes the Patriot Roundtable happen.
All right.
There you go. And we always have to talk about the money. I hate to do it, but it's about $300 to $500 a month to put our little group on. So there's always a place that you can put a little cash, and if you would make a 6 month, some people have given us $50 for 6 months, and we sure appreciate that. So I had to mention that. Next month, pretty cool meeting coming up. We have Patrick Webb with the Montana Family Foundation coming, and so that will be the January meeting. And I don't know if any of you legislators, I guess I've never asked any of you, but I've heard about the culture war for years. And I guess I never knew where that war was fought. And that war is fought in the halls of the Capitol every other year. And when you've got one of these little badges and you're walking around the halls of the Capitol, there is one organization that is in the halls of the Capitol fighting for family values every day. And it is the Montana Family Foundation. And so those folks that are online and those in the room, we're going to have another great meeting next month. Okay. So tonight, I think the way that we're going to do this is I am just going to introduce all of our speakers right now. And then Alan Olson, when I get done, you're going to be the first speaker. So, but I want to do a little introduction. But we have a home run program tonight. And this is part 3 on energy, something we're all concerned about. We have 3 speakers, all coming at us from different angles. And the way that we would like to do this is I will introduce all 3 speakers, and when I am done, Alan Olson will speak first. When Alan is done, Greg Bailey will speak second. And our home run hitter is Senator Jason Small. Yeah, you're special. But Alan Olson comes to us from Roundup, Montana. He is currently the Director of Government Affairs with Northwestern Energy. Before that, Alan was the Executive Director for the Montana Petroleum Association. In his spare time, Alan turned out of the Montana House and the Senate, serving as Chairman of the House and Senate Energy Committee for several of those years. Before Alan got into politics, he put 38 years in with Halliburton and Sanjel. Not a bad run at all, Alan. And Greg Bailey comes to us from Helena. He is a professional engineer with a mechanical engineering degree from Bozeman. Greg has dedicated 23 years to Northwestern Energy, developing expertise in distribution operations, asset management planning, and most recently has worked in project development. And tonight, Greg will discuss how nuclear fits into the future energy strategy for Northwest Energy. And our cleanup hitter tonight is former State Senator Jason Small. And Jason is going to make the case for coal. Coal is under attack. We have seen 4 coal plants totally closed down and dismantled in eastern Montana. And as a member of the Montana Boilermakers, this is really a big deal. Jason has a degree in metallurgy and welding and has taught welding for the Boilermakers. And I would like to introduce Josh Mangold, and he is the business director for the Montana Boilermakers. Drove down from Helena to be a part of this. And so, as I put this meeting together, I had to make several cold turkey phone calls. Josh and I chatted several times. But thank you, Josh, for coming. And thank you for representing your union, because we got to have you. We got to have you. So on that note, I'm going to hand the microphone to our leadoff batter, Alan Olson. And at the conclusion of the meeting, we'll open it up for questions for about 30 minutes. So if you have a question, girls, are we going to make them write them down, or are we just going to hand them the microphone, give them the mic? Okay. So Alan, thank you for coming. Look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Greg. I had the opportunity to work with Greg quite a lot the last couple sessions. And he is one awesome legislator.
Heck yeah.
He's not afraid to ask the hard questions, and he'll stick around and listen to my sometimes lengthy answers. But I'd like to tell you a little bit more about myself. I'm a 4th generation Montanan who was born and raised in Havre. Got out of high school, started cowboying for a little bit, met my wife at the stockyards in Butte. And we were married about 3 months. And I come home from the Bob Marshall, and she said, "Alan, it's time for you to get a real job." So I went to work for Halliburton, and she never saw me again because I was on the road the whole time. But I did get home a few times. I ended up with 3 kids. My oldest son, he's a foreman at Signal Peak Coal Mine in Roundup. My oldest daughter's an RN and a ranch hand for her husband up at Forest Grove. And my youngest daughter is a investigator for Adult Protective Services in Billings. But energy definitely tweaked my interest when I got into the legislature. We were in the midst of deregulation. We were watching power prices soar up to $2,500 a megawatt. And that had a lot to do with deregulation. A lot of the companies that were involved in the legislature at that time started coming to us, "Oh, you got to do something." Well, those companies made a choice. Those are the same companies that spearheaded deregulation. 2 refineries in Billings and Montana Resources in Butte brought in railroad locomotives to generate power because it was cheaper than buying it on the market. Then in the interim, I got put on the Electrical Utility Transition Restructuring Committee. And I tell you what, deregulation opened up a lot of eyes. Montana Power sold all their assets. They sold the poles and wires to Northwestern Energy. They sold all their generation assets to PPL Montana. Northwestern was not allowed to own any generation assets, but they still had to supply power to the people on their system as a supplier of last resort. The public never went to deregulation. Deregulation would have never worked in Montana because we were captive to one company, PPL. They controlled the market. Now you can look at market prices in the mid-Columbia, and today they're bouncing around between $48 and $72 a megawatt, but you still have to add $10 onto that for transmission charges to get it here. A couple years later, I got the bright idea, we're gonna end deregulation. Everybody wanted the Montana Power Company back. Well, we started down that path. But in the meantime, Northwestern had filed bankruptcy. Utility business is not a fun place to be sometimes. Market forces, regulatory forces, political forces can drive you from one end to the other. Hopefully you stop long enough in the middle to where you can make some sound business sense. So we allowed Northwestern to go back in and own generation assets. The first thing they did, they built a gas-fired power plant at Anaconda, the Dave Gates facility. Then they bought the hydro facilities from PPL. The Public Service Commission had kittens over that. Oh my God, you're buying back what we already paid for. You didn't pay for that under Northwestern system. You paid for it under Montana Power. Montana Power made bad business decisions, and they ended up as market generators. Then we brought in a piece of coal strip that was owned by the holding company that owned Northwestern. And we built the Laurel plant. We spent 3 years in litigation on that. And when you're in litigation, you shut everything down, but you don't let your contractor go because you're not going to get them back. The PSC just disallowed $43 million of Northwestern's investment into that power plant. Now the question is, are we going to take the loss or are we going to spin it off? As many of you know, we just, January 1st, we're taking over 590 megawatts of coal strip. 220 megawatts from Avista and 370 from Puget. That is more power than we can use. We're going to spin off, or we're trying to spin off the 370 from Puget into a holding company because we can't put it into the rate base. You know, the Public Service Commission, with advice from the Montana Environmental Information Center, is going to be filing legal briefs with FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. MEIC is driving up the cost of power. MEIC and PSC staff are doing their damnedest to make sure that we don't own more generation. If this deal goes south with Puget and Avista, that could have some serious bearing on Colstrip. We needed those assets so we could control Colstrip. With those assets, we control 55%. None of the other utilities can vote to shut it down. We control it. We want it. We needed the extra power. You know, there's a lot of discussion about data centers. Data centers aren't the only large loads that are looking at Montana. Sawmills are large loads. Mines are large loads. We're in the process of filing a large load tariff with the Public Service Commission. Large load, or homeowners, residential ratepayers, will not pay for this.
They will not pay for the upgrades to the transmission distribution system. That's not the way it works. Currently, industrial load subsidizes commercial load. And commercial load and industrial subsidize residential. And industrial and commercial and residential subsidize irrigation power rates. The way we operate this is cost causer pays. And the people that are building the new hockey rink in Billings, they're finding that out. To tie into our system, it's gonna cost them $50,000 for the transformers and the line upgrades to get them the power for that new hockey rink there in Billings. A residential customer, if they tie into the system, they're on the outskirts of town, they have to pay for those upgrades. So existing residential customers don't get that cost shift. So cost shift. Jerry, that's gonna bring me into my next topic. Taxes. What the legislature passed this last session is a cost shift. All they did was kick the can down the road. In 2001, when Jeff and I were a lot younger, skinnier, and a lot better looking than we are now, the multiplier for residential property was 3.89%. And it's been steadily dropped down to now it's 0.76%. But our facilities have been taxed at 12% for about the same length of time, never going down. So what we're looking at now with what happened, and there are some legislators that like to say, well, tax big out-of-state corporations. Well, that's what this did. It's going to raise Northwestern's taxes $16 million a year. But you know who pays that? It's the customer of the utility. It didn't just hit Northwestern, it hit every electric co-op, it hit MDU, it hit the telephone companies, it hit the pipeline companies. Everybody likes to tax pipelines. But when you raise the taxes on a pipeline, that oil and gas producer gets less for his crude oil and natural gas. So that means you get less oil and natural gas taxes. The only ones that can't recoup or don't recoup these costs are oil and gas companies, mining companies, and agriculture. Those three business entities are price takers. They only get what the market's going to give them. So when you raise the taxes on everybody else, Burlington Northern, it's going to cost you more to ship grain. Raise the taxes on the elevator. They're going to charge you more to handle your grain. Raise the taxes on the stockyards. Those fees are probably going to go up a little bit too. Raise the prices on Walmart. They go up. You know that. I don't know why they can't see that. But there again, you know, the legislators that are here in this room did not support that. Thank you. So, yeah, we've got tax shifts, we've got regulatory burdens. One of the things, regulatory burdens that came up with the Laurel plant, we should have known that COVID was coming. We should have known that. We should have known that. We should have bought all that equipment before COVID happened. That's what NEIC told the PSC staff, and that's what the PSC staff told the PSC, that Northwestern should have known that those CAT engines were going to go up in price, because they're made in Germany, they don't make them in the US anymore. The turbines I don't think they're made here. I don't think there's too much that's made in the US anymore, so then you take all those costs, and you take the downtime, you take the legal fees, and you wonder why things cost so much. But, Greg wanted me to talk a little bit about the fire bill, but, and there again, every legislator in this room voted for the fire mitigation bill that we, along with electric co-ops and NDU, ran. The best thing out of that, we got rid of strict liability. The short, dirty version of the bill is, if we're negligent, prove us guilty, and we pay. A lot of people like to talk about the fire that happened up in Denton here a few years back. We had settled with 111 out of 114 litigants within 6 months. The leftover litigants that just happen to be trial lawyers. They're not ready to settle yet. But that's kind of the short, dirty version of where we're at with Northwestern today. We do like coal, Jason. We love coal. We love natural gas. And our intentions are to keep Colstrip open as long as we possibly can, and Greg's going to touch on that a little bit. But we like our relationships in Colstrip and with the mines. I'm trying to get them to burn a little bit of that Roundup coal, but they said it's too hot. I said, just add a little dirt to it. We can bring the BTUs down. Thanks, Ray.
Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Greg Bailey. I'm Director of Project Management, Project Development at Northwestern Energy. And what I'm going to talk to you about today, they asked me to come in. We're doing a feasibility study on nuclear SMRs. And I want to kind of give a little bit of context behind why. Greg was talking about the importance of energy. Alan was hitting on that as well. I always kind of explain this to people in this way. You think about balancing the grid. You got supply and you got load. And if you think of like the old balance scales where you got a needle pointing straight up and you're balancing on either end, one side's supply, one side's load. Load is the customers turning on their lights, turning on their equipment and everything, and supply is having the generation to get it across there. And then obviously you're moving it through the transmission distribution system from point A to point B. The needle on the top of that scale is pointing at a number. Does anybody know what that number is? It's 60. It's what our grid operates on. It's 60 hertz. And when you start getting that thing out of balance, you start getting out of frequency, you just start shutting off equipment, and you start seeing it around. It happened, a big one in Spain. It's happened in some other spots where they start getting out of balance with that. You start having rolling blackouts. And when you got them that big, you don't just go turn a light on. It takes quite a while to get it back out. So when you're looking from a supply side on here, this isn't a knock on wind, it isn't a knock on solar. I think they all have their places in a portfolio, and I think a portfolio should be diverse with that. But when you've got stuff like coal, natural gas, and nuclear, you got what they call a dispatchable energy source. You can turn it on and turn it off and run it how you want to see it ran. So keeping that balance in there is one of our jobs at Northwestern Energy, and so that's why it's important for us to understand what are all the different options out there. So we look at these things with three, I'll call them guiding principles: affordability, sustainability, and reliability. And you'll hear our CEO talk about that a lot when he gets up there. What we're trying to do is understand, we're doing this feasibility to understand, does nuclear have a place in our portfolio? Does it fit in those guiding principles? Is it something that we can use? So anyway, that's just a little bit of background on why we're even doing this, because I'm sure some people are studying nuclear. Why are you doing this? I think it's prudent to do. I don't think it's prudent to just say, no, it doesn't work for us. I think we got to look at it, and we got to study it and understand it and see if it does. So I'll jump into this here. See if we can get started. Okay. So what I'm going to talk to you guys about then is I'm going to hit on nuclear power from safety. I'm going to talk about safety. I'm going to talk about the fuel. I'm going to talk about the different types of reactors. that we're familiar with and are coming around, and then what are we doing? What is Northwestern doing in this feasibility study? Reactors are changing quite a bit. The nuclear powers, I put these two pictures up here because you think, and you saw it on the little flyer, I don't know where it is, where you got the big hourglass cooling towers, and almost all of them, people think of nuclear power, they get a vision of those cooling towers. That's not really what they're looking like anymore, specifically the SMRs. I mean, the Westinghouse AP300 up on the top right there, that looks like something that might be a museum more than a nuclear reactor when you look at the building, the way that they're setting these ones up, whereas the X-Energy XE100 is a little bit more industrial looking on here. So anyway, we'll jump into it on here. And so, like I said, I wanted to talk about the safety aspect, and it pertains to a meltdown. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about safety. So there's three words that I'm going to be hitting on throughout this presentation: active, passive, and inherent. Active safety requires constant external input. That's where you need a reactor that's cooled by water. It's got to have its pumps moving the water through to keep the reactor cool so it doesn't get a runaway reaction. Your neutrons are moderated by graphite control rods that are speeding up and slowing down the reaction when you want to control how much electricity you want to generate. Passive runs a lot on the same. Neutrons are moderated by water. They're controlled by the graphite control rods, but what they did is they started working into the design things like natural air convection to help with cooling and the loss of power, or gravity feed water cooling systems in those, so that's more of a passive system. And then what you'll start seeing with these new reactors that, I don't know if you can turn on the news anymore without hearing about somebody talking about SMRs and the nuclear renaissance, or whatever they want to call it, that's going on right now. But the Gen 4s have the more of the inherent safety, and that's where it's built into the physics of the fuel. If it gets too hot, it will swell, it'll absorb neutrons. The neutrons that are in there start missing the atoms, whole 9 yards. Anyway, what I'll get to it in a little bit later is inherent safety. Basically, you got to keep it cool just to sustain a reaction. If you don't keep it cool, the reactor just shuts down. This isn't science fiction. They've been doing it for a long time. They've actually done it in Idaho National Labs with EBR2, where they shut all the cooling off and everything, and the reactor just shut itself down quietly. On there, it's what they call a walk away, walk back. They tell the operators in the event of an incident, get up and walk away. It'll shut itself down. Then you can walk back. So a slide that I think is pretty interesting in here on safest sources of energy out of our world and data. You can see nuclear energy down there in the bottom where they rate that one from pollution. This is primarily death rate from pollution, and that number down there on the bottom actually includes Chernobyl and Fukushima in there. And then it is probably the cleanest from a greenhouse gas emission. To hit on that's that sustainability piece in there. You do want to have something that's clean. We are in favor of coal. We do like to use coal. We do want to run coal strict as long as we possibly can. I want to hit on that stuff, but I don't think it's a secret that coal's got a target on its back. We got a friendly administration right now, but that could change. And we got to have plans to back that up should something happen. So then that was the safety stuff. The three things I wanted to hit on there was the active, passive, and inherent. And then the next one is talking about the nuclear fuel. So spent fuel, it's not the Simpsons green sludge and yellow cans. That's not what comes out of reactors. There's solid metal fuel rods in there. And what happens is they're made up of primarily uranium-235 and 238. It's mined out of the ground, right? It's a naturally occurring metal. Its makeup is about 0.3% uranium-235, which is used in the fuel, and the rest of it's uranium-238. 238 is a fertile. It doesn't interact in a thermal reactor. But anyway, they enrich it up to a 3 to 5% minimum to get it to where it can sustain a reaction on there. So when they pull that fuel rod out, that 5% waste product up there, that was the uranium-235 that they used to generate the heat to boil water to make electricity. The remaining of it, that 94% down there, is uranium-238. Interesting thing about uranium-238 is you can use that in the newer generation fast reactors as a fuel source. So the U.S. is sitting on about 90,000 metric tons of spent fuel from all the reactors that we've been running since 1955. And to put that into a visual, 90,000 metric tons of uranium spent fuel would fit on a football field about 10 yards deep. You could put all of it right in there. Over 90% of that can be recycled and used in newer generation reactors. On there, I took this little line from, I was having a discussion with Gary Perry, Representative Gary Perry, and I was like, I like that line, I'm going to take it. So nuclear waste is only waste if you waste it. It's something that can be used out there on it. So that was the fuel reactor types. They're primarily boiled down into these four. You got light water reactors. Gen 1 through Gen 3 plus are light water reactors, and there's two kinds of light water reactors. There's a boiling water reactor, where the water is boiled right at the core, creates the steam goes through the turbine, generates electricity, comes back, it gets cooled, goes back through the cycle, and it just keeps going through that. Problem with a boiling water reactor is that water will pick up radioactive isotopes, and it will contaminate the piping, the generator, the turbines, all that stuff downstream. Not a showstopper, they're still building them today. It just complicates maintenance, decommissioning, all of those things. Excuse me. The other type of light water reactor is a pressure water reactor. Does the same thing, boils water right off the core, but what they do is they shield it and run it through a heat exchanger and boil a secondary loop system of water. And they use that steam. That steam is clean, doesn't contaminate anything that goes down. So they can keep it all contained into a containment area, the radioactive part, and still use that heat to generate electricity on it. And that's a lot of the Gen 2, Gen 3 reactors are pressure water reactors. And then you got your high temperature gas reactors. It's the same principle, but the way that those work, they get a whole lot harder with their fuel. They're higher enriched in uranium, but they use helium as their heat transfer. And helium's an inert gas, so it will not pick up radioactive isotopes, kind of like a pressure water reactor. It'll boil the water, create steam, doesn't contaminate anything downstream. Then you got molten salt reactors. That's what they're building in Kemmerer, Wyoming right now, the Natrium project over there with TerraPower. It uses a mixture of molten salt, and it uses the same principle. It's an inert fuel that doesn't contaminate the water. Every one of them, what you'll find the similar commonalities here is they're all boiling water. That's what we're getting to. Get a heat source to boil water to generate steam, to generate electricity. And then you got the liquid metal reactors where they're using actual sodium, potassium, or lead or tin as a coolant in there instead of water. And it's the same story, it goes through that, but it has a very high heat transfer rate, so it's really efficient. EDR2 that started generating electricity down at Idaho National Labs in the 60s, operated all the way up till the 90s, till it was shut down by the Clinton administration, but it was a liquid metal reactor. That was one where they shut all the cooling off to it, all the cooling pumps, all the electricity. They basically recreated what happened at Fukushima, and the reactor just shut itself down on there. So those are the different reactor types, and then I'm going to hit really quick on the generations, because this is what you'll start hearing. You'll hear people talk about Gen 3, Gen 4, Gen 2 nuclear reactors. The Gen 1 was the first ones that we started building. Shipping port, where they put one of the first ones up, it was a boiling water reactor. It had single source cooling, relying on power to keep it cool and keep it operating. They're pretty inefficient use of fuel, so they generated a lot of that spent fuel that we got sitting in casks out there. But those were the first ones. Gen 2, examples of that one would be like 3 Mile Island or Fukushima. Those were Gen 2. That's where they started bringing in the pressure water reactor and understanding how to isolate different areas of your reactor to try and keep it safer. They start putting in redundant cooling measures and containment structures, but they're still pretty inefficient with the fuel use. A little bit of an increase from Gen 1s, but they still put out quite a bit of spent fuel on the other side. The Gen 3 and Gen 3 pluses they started designing in the 1990s to 2000s. The AP 1000 that the Vogel project over in Georgia that they just completed, that primarily focused on safety features. So here's where they started bringing in those passive safety features. Natural convection cooling, gravity feed, and power loss. The other one that's probably the most important in here is this bullet where I talk about a standardized design where they're going from FOAK, they call it FOAK to NOAK, and FOAK stands for first of a kind. Each generator or each reactor that they built, it was a first of a kind. They're building them on site, they're designing them right to there. If they get a standardized design, it's kind of think of the Henry Ford model. You get the stuff going out, you're doing it the same way each time, you start building multiples of them, the costs come down, and that's where they call it an nth of a kind. They're trying to get to nth of a kind efficiency gains. That's where the affordability of that guiding principle I talked about. So we're hitting on sustainability with the fuel and recycling. The affordability is getting to an nth of a kind to where now you're producing electricity at reasonable rates, competitive rates in the market on there. Fuel efficiency and spent loads were pretty minor enhancements over the Gen 2s on those. So then they start moving into the Gen 4. That's 2010, about when they started bringing these ones up, although a lot of this is based off of what they did at INL with EBR2, but they're focused on sustainability, safety, and proliferation resistant from the spent fuel. You start seeing some of those high temperature gas reactors, molten salt reactors, or liquid metal fast reactors, and that's the difference in there. The thermal, you hear people talk about a thermal reactor and a fast reactor. A thermal reactor operates in water where they moderate the neutrons, keep them at a lower speed, so it only interacts with the uranium-235 and not the 238. Fast reactors go at faster speeds. They can react with the 238, and that's where you can use the spent fuel as a fuel source for the new fast reactors on there. Inherent safety features, and I said this at the beginning, but the bulleted point in there is the key to this one. If you take anything away from this, the Gen 4 reactors, they gotta keep cool to sustain a nuclear reaction. If they get too hot, they just start shutting down. And whereas the Gen 3 pluses and earlier, they needed to keep those cool to avoid a runaway reaction, where then you would end up with a meltdown. You melt down the fuel, expose the core to air. Quite a bit of improved economics and fuel efficiencies with these. The other thing on them is the SMRs. You'll hear that. That stands for Small Modular Reactor, and all that's talking about is the size of the reactor that you're going to build. You can have a Gen 3. As a matter of fact, the very first picture I showed on there, that at Westinghouse AP300, it's an SMR, but it's a Gen 3 plus SMR. It's a pressure water reactor. Where some of these other ones, like down here, the Aurora Powerhouse, I think it looks like a ski lodge. That's about a 50 megawatt reactor, sits on like 8 acres of land is what it takes up in there, and that one's a fast reactor in there. So anyway, those are the reactor types. So I just wanted to kind of give you guys an overview of the safety, the fuel, what's actually out there, and then the different generation of reactors that they got available. So what are we doing? So we're working through this feasibility and trying to learn everything we can about what goes into building a reactor. What are the costs that go into building a reactor? How do you de-risk the construction of a reactor? Because they can get very costly and very big real fast. Anyway, so we look at partnerships. What are the right kind of vendors that we want to team up with? What are the right reactors out there that we would want to see in our portfolio? Again, this is a feasibility study, and we get to the end of it, the answer might be we're not going to do it right now. The costs aren't there. We're missing on one of those guiding principles, whether affordability or reliability or sustainability. We're just going to shelve it for right now, and we'll come back to it when the technology advances. But looking at the vendors, looking at financing plans with different owners, looking at developers and operators. The NRC won't issue an operator's license unless you have experience. Well, if you don't have a reactor, you don't have experience. So that's where you got to start looking at partnerships in there to develop that and get a license. Rules, laws, and regulations, combing through those, understanding what is out there that would help or hinder from getting this if we were to move forward with it. That's one where we work a lot with utilities in neighboring states that do have nuclear reactors in there and ask a lot of questions about what are the laws that help make this a reality in there and try to understand those. And I skipped over engagement strategies, advocates, hurdles, blockers. That's really what we're doing. Probably the biggest piece is the public engagement and getting out there and understanding where everybody's thoughts, education, feelings are. I'd love to hear from you guys on how you feel about nuclear reactors and what are you guys' thoughts on it. And that's just trying to understand where does that sit with Montanans? How does everybody feel about a nuclear reactor in the state of Montana? Some are for, some are against. Those who are against, why is that? What is the reasons? It's something that we need to understand. And then the land selection study guides. Of the Electric Power Research Institute, EPRI down there, put out a guideline that the NRC adopted, saying if you're going to site a nuclear plant, you come in for a license for this siting. Here's the things that we want to see you work through. And so it was pretty handy to go through that. It's a boring document. It's like 200 pages long. I'd never want to read it again. But you go through it and it walks you through all the different things that you got to walk through and think about if you're going to go and do this stuff. How do you come out with it? So I'll spend the next few slides just kind of diving into the vendor and then the land selection study on this one, and then open it up for questions if we have any. Or are we going to save those to the end, I guess?
Save to the end.
Save them to the end, all right. So I'll talk about the vendor, and the vendor is the OEM. That's the company that's out there building the reactor, and you got a bunch of them out there. As a matter of fact, there's over 120 of them out there that'll come and tell you that they got the latest and greatest reactor design, and we can't wait to sell you one. Well, we want to start walking through that and see what you're really getting yourself into. We went through a weighted numerical scoring and then got to a top 5 and did in-depth review. And so this is kind of what it looks like. You start with about your 129 vendors around there. You start looking at commercial design. Is this a demonstration of you guys actually actively working towards a commercial design on your reactor? That filtered it down to about 78 vendors. And then we went through supply security. You got a lot of these guys that are coming from Russia, Chinese, South African designs. We're probably not going to want to do some business with those just from the geopolitical climate and stuff. So we scrape those ones out. And then you look at your module size. I don't know if an AT1000 is right for Montana. That's a big reactor. I don't know if we'd ever need anything that big, and that's a lot of money. So that's an example of where probably not going to look at one of those, a little bigger than what we need. Then there's other ones on the micro reactor side. They're probably a little bit too small. We don't need something in there. It's kind of the three bears. Goldilocks and three bears. What's just right in there from a size standpoint. So we screen it down to that one, and then their commercialization date. When are they planning to get to this? When do they think they'll start to get into those nth of a kind efficiency gains to where it starts becoming affordable? So we did the almost very similar thing on the land selection. You start with a region of interest. You start putting exclusionary factors in there. It could be a number of things. It could be wetlands. It could be conservation easements. It could be all kinds of different things that we can get our hands on from a publicly available data standpoint. You start putting it together almost like a Swiss cheese approach, and you start seeing where do the points start rising to the top. That's like, okay, this one starts to check all the boxes that you're probably going to be okay from the NRC standpoint if you start looking at an area in these different regions. Kind of comes out looking about like that, and we go through a number of different things. These are just some samples in here, but this little graph on the right, and I apologize, it's very small for you guys to see. There's a lot of information up there, but we go through and we look at it from seismic, water supply, flooding, wetlands, air and water, radium nuclide pathways, even all the way down to socioeconomics and schools and workforces. Where can we get those? Where can you train them? So on and so forth, and you get a scoring and start bringing some of that crane comes to the top, and you start seeing some sites that, okay, this one makes pretty good sense, that you'd want to start looking around to see if this might be a spot for a nuclear plant. Again, some of the things that these look like, whether it's construction, employment, industry type, or wetland maps and publicly available data, prevailing weather stuff that you need to understand when you're going to go and site one of these things. And you basically get to these end feasibility studies, and what we do is we put it together and we go sit down with our board of directors and others and say, okay, this is what we found. Here's what we came up with. Is this something we want to move forward on? And try and our option is to try and de-risk this as much as possible if we are to go through that, because that's what the biggest challenge is. What building a nuclear plant is, there's just such a large amount of risks from financial and other standpoints. Once you got them built, they're operating, they operate very, very well. The other thing to point out to that, which we're finding in our studies in here, and I'm glad you guys are here to point this out, when we look at nuclear reactors, and we did this study with INL, you're going to find about 80% of the same jobs at a nuclear plant that you would find at Colstrip in there. There's some higher end jobs, some of the nuclear physicist engineering jobs that they'll bring in, but pretty much everything else outside of that's going to be the same jobs you find at any other plant. Still need Boilermakers. Still need electricians, still need mechanics, still need welders, still need all that stuff. The same one. So anyway, that's the study on there.
Jason?
All right, perfect. So just thank you for the introduction earlier, and thank you for the invite. So I guess this is the time of the evening where we attack Northwestern with pitchforks and whatever else we have, masks and whatever. Yeah, terrible deal. All right, so my name's Jason Small. I am a termed out senator of the state of Montana. I'm a boilermaker by trade. And I hold one more oddity. I'm also probably the best of anybody's knowledge, the first elected Republican official to ever be elected to run the State Federation of Labor. So I do that. So kind of a jack of all trades, and I know nothing about anything, basically. So we'll go with that. And so to understand coal generation, understand where we come from in this state, you know, we do need to take into account a little bit of history and probably some statistics, right? So Montana, within the exterior boundaries of the state of Montana, we possess 7.5% of the entire world's coal, which is a staggering number, right? I mean, that's huge. Just south and to the east of us, 2-hour drive, right where I live, the Crow and Northern Cheyenne Indian Reservation actually sit directly above the largest reserve. So the largest reserve in the United States. So coal, as we know, is in abundance in this area. We still operate several mines. Let's be frank, the coal industry has been on a very steady decline since, well, I guess the Obama administration years ago. Second term, they not to get all political about it, one of his campaign strategies was basically he promised everybody he was going to shut coal down, and if you wanted to continue on with it, it would become so cost prohibitive that nobody would want to touch it anymore. Well, you know, they won. They did that in a lot of cases. It went from an extraordinarily cheap and reliable fuel to being overregulated and over the years becoming more and more expensive to operate, maintain, and to use coal to produce electricity. And why is that? Well, a lot of it was just a change in, well, primarily was a change in federal regulation that made it more and more cost prohibitive to burn coal as we know it. So right now in the state of Montana, we still have several mines. We have the Spring Creek Mine, NTEC, Navajo Transitional Energy Corporation there in Decker. We have East and West Decker Mine is not producing coal for export or anything else, but there are still people working there, and they are actively hiring right now, but that is basically just trying to clean it up and get it all put back to normal. We have, of course, at Coal Strip, the Rosebud Mine, operated by Westmoreland, which is, most people in this room know that's a mine-to-mouth mine. So it basically gets dug up in Coal Strip, stays in Coal Strip. They don't have any active shipping or transportation or open contracts anywhere else to be able to haul the coal to. We have Bull Mountain, Signal Peak, Roundup, of course. Very large underground coal mine, which is quite unique to this area because we haven't necessarily had underground coal mines here since around the turn of the 19th century, so 1890s, 1900, and that was, after that, the underground coal mining kind of started to go away. So, interestingly enough, if you were to look at the still active coal permits that the state carries, the Absoluca mine, the Crow coal mine, which was also operated by Westmoreland,
They pretty much went out of business last year. They are still handling and carrying a permit as we speak. Savage, right down the road here, which wasn't a real large mine. Their permit is also still active. And once again, east and west Edgar. So a little bit of history on Montana's coal market. 1880, 1890s, the mines were small scale and local. Every little town, eastern Montana, had a coal mine somewhere where you could drive a wagon to it, get a load, and bring it home, just in the area where I live, I actually live in Kirby, south of Busby, if any of you are familiar with it, the cut across road down to Sheridan, Wyoming. And there's probably a half dozen of those small mines within, I don't know, 10 miles of my house even. So, they were frequent, they were out there, and they were used because that's what kept everybody alive. It wasn't keeping electricity going at that point, it was just a matter of survival. So, we carry on. 1889, that's when the Red Lodge coal mine opened up. And that was processing and mining coal for trains. That was a huge thing back then, of course. It was steam locomotives. They weren't electric, they weren't diesel. They were burning coal, creating steam, keeping everybody going down the line. Somewhere directly after that, coal strip also went into production. They were digging steam shovels there. That was supplying Burlington Northern. And that went on for quite a long time. Well, right about 1950 or so, or just prior to that, they were full on transitioning from steam trains to other trains, diesel or whatnot. So Montana's coal market basically collapsed around 1950, 1949. It was somewhere right in there. And then it was a little while, there was kind of a lull there. There was kind of around a 20-year span where coal wasn't that big of a deal in the state per se. There were still some active coal mines, people were still burning it in homes, and it did have some industrial use yet, right? So 1970, the Clean Air Act was passed federally, and that's when things went gangbusters. All of a sudden, the stuff that everybody was burning in their old coal stove in the basement or whatnot, well, the stuff that were big out of Montana was actually low sulfur, clean, pretty good BTU for bituminous coal, and it kind of put us at the top of the food chain as far as, opportunity there. Well, frankly, so 1970 Clean Air Act, it made us the belle of the ball, right? Us, Wyoming, this Powder River Basin coal. It was relatively easy back then to permit and open business. Wyoming and Montana were both open for business at that time. I think sometimes now it's pretty much just Wyoming that's open for business, but that can always change. So we've seen an influx of coal usage, coal burning, electrical generation in Montana. We had one of the first larger scale plants was just outside of Bennings there. It's been knocked down. It was a victim of the Clean Power Plant. Maybe a dozen years ago or so, the Correct Power Plant. That was burning coal. Of course, coal strip started, I do believe 1972 is when they started construction on the first unit there. By 1986, they had all 4 units completed and online. So that made Montana a huge exporter of energy, electricity, and coal power. That put eastern Montana on the map. It gave everybody the opportunity to go to work. It created tons of jobs, not only just coal mine jobs, it created generation jobs, it created gas station jobs, it created schools, it brought in teachers. It did everything that industry and business can do. There was an old legislator that passed away here this past year, and you either really loved him or you kind of hated him. He was a great guy, but he had a saying. He said the state of Montana has a little coal dust sprinkled on everything, and it sure does. We collect tax off it. The coal severance tax basically is collected on about $600 million a year worth of revenue generated by the coal industry. So that number fluctuates. That was one of the closer ones I could find. So there should still be sort of in the ballpark. Yeah. As far as jobs go, you know, that's the kicker right there. I mean, basically what we have in eastern Montana is very akin, coal's very similar to, let's just say potatoes in Ireland, right? I mean, without it, we wouldn't be in a famine. It's, currently right now, there's probably just under 1,000 active, coal miners in Montana. But once again, that number is minuscule. It pales in comparison to the peripheral jobs that the mines create. I mean, for every active coal mine, they build a town around it basically, and then you have a sleeper town right next to it. And that coal goes somewhere, gets used, and whatnot. So it's a huge spider web of opportunity that extracting coal creates. One of the other interesting things, the state of Montana, the coal jobs, electrical generation jobs, are, of course, they're pretty high paying. They're not easy jobs. Most of them have been, you know, there's been a demand. They're jobs that workers want to take, right? So they pay, the average coal industry job in the state of Montana pays just about 2 times the average per capita salary of every other existing job in the state. So that's pretty good sum. Pretty good sum. All right, so what do we do with this coal money? It pays for the schools. It pays taxes in every which direction. If you were to take the opportunity, and many of the legislators in here are probably the only ones that have really ever looked at the budget, the state budget, or really dove into it. We have used the coal trust to create silos, which basically fund damn near everything in the state. It's incredible. It's what keeps the libraries open. I mean, performing arts, whether or not you like it, I mean, coal's probably paying for it even. I mean, it could be a performing arts program, or you just name it. I used to, when I was starting out, it was pretty interesting, you know. I didn't know which direction I'd go as far as doing work. I knew I wanted to be a construction worker, and I was on a job site one time, and I had some welders coming, and I thought to myself, man, that's something I'd like to do, I think. So I was pretty fortunate to grow up in the Colstrip area. I knew a bunch of these Boilermakers, and I thought to myself, you know, that's kind of what I want to do. So I started working the plants, done a lot of welding, did everything else, branched out. When we came under fire politically, you know, probably 15, 16 years ago now, when things were starting to sway away from the coal market and the coal industry, I kind of brought it upon myself to start speaking out about it here and there, which led me to run for an office, which probably wrecked my life, but that has been a wonderful opportunity, and I have to look at the other legislators in the room, and you know, Lee was saying something about making friends, right? The thing about being in the legislature is I think it bonds everybody by trauma. That's the only way I can explain it, because in no other sector or no other job in the world can you go somewhere for 90 plus days, fight with each other all day long, and then when it's over with, still like each other. You know, it's kind of daunting. So when I first began, and I think this still holds true, and you know, eventually when you're exposed to the legislature, when you're exposed to how other groups work, and what's happening outside, everything's manipulation. I'll make one kind of inflammatory comment, I guess, and then I'll backpedal on it a little bit. But 10 years ago, as far as I was concerned, that using anything but coal, or basically its existing infrastructure to create energy, was nothing more than basically giving the companies the opportunity to extort consumers, electrical consumers. And I still feel that way. I mean, as we're doing these transitional shifts, a lot of this is just a transfer of money from entity to entity, whether it be political parties or just whoever's controlling the different sources of electrical generation. So it's very important as we, as a group, as legislators, we keep our eyes open, right? There's always outside interests that are going to come in. They're going to try to sway opinion. They're going to throw money at different things. And it's very imperative that the state of Montana, and especially the folks directly affected so close, as closely as we are with the mines in our areas, you know, we have to be on the ball. We have to make sure that we continue to back coal, to back electrical generation, and we do these things to keep our community strong, keep our job markets, keep jobs available, and basically keep the opportunity that everybody that lives in this area has always had. You never want to take a step backwards. So, with that being said, I'll answer questions. It's about all I got on coal for right now, but I got other stuff.
I forgot to mention to you guys too, I'll set them out over here. I brought along some information you guys can take and read. There's just the facts from Idaho National Labs they did. It's just one sheet, both sides. Pictures of big font, so it isn't too hard to read. On 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and Fukushima. And then at Northwestern, some more stuff we put together, a small modular reactor fact sheet, but I'll set these over here and you guys can grab those, take them if you'd like.
Well, panel, thank you very much. You were pretty kind to these guys. We did have 2 more legislators snuck in the back door on us. Nellie and Bob Phelan. I made everybody just introduce yourself, tell who you represented, just a little bit about yourself. So if we could get you guys to do that.
Sure. I am Nellie Nickel, and I'm out of Billings, House District 53, but I'm actually working in Miles City again this week. And let's see, I have 4 children and a really cute puppy and a husband that supports all of this craziness and lets me travel around and do all of these things. So I'm very blessed and glad to be here.
Hello, I'm Morgan Teal. I represent House District 30, which is half of Richland County, a little bit of Roosevelt County, born and raised in Sydney. This is my freshman term, and I always enjoy coming down to these meetings, so thank you for letting me join you.
I'm Senator Bob Phelan. I represent 9 counties, 30 zip codes. Connie and I got the signs picked up. We got 625 miles on our pickup. So that's how big it is. So anyway, I Senate District 17 is the one that I represent. Anyway, thank you. I do have some kids too. I've got 4 2 boys and 2 girls and about 12 grandkids.
Well, thank you, legislators, for coming. And we're going to take just a few minutes or some time here. And we've got a great panel here. There is a lot of knowledge. We've got some legislators here. We would just open the floor for questions to really anybody in the room. So if anybody has a question, we'll deal with that for a little bit here. I see Lisa's got her hand up in the back.
Okay, and please note that we will hang on to the microphone and we will put it close to your mouth.
I didn't hear anything at all about the Black Hills merger, if that can be addressed. And then specifically what I'm concerned with is with most utility companies, Northwest and Black Hills included, they're majority owned by institutional investors. As much as I found 97% for Northwest Energy. And I know Montana pensions are invested in utility companies like yours, and Montana does not have any stipulations on how their proxies are voted, which then leaves the BlackRocks, Vanguards up to voting them whatever way they want. And historically, although it's dropping, like back in 2020, we had the institutional investors voting over 50% of the time for green energy. And that, of course, changes the infrastructure and the investment. So I'd like to know how much direction from stockholders that are institutional investors determine what you're doing or direct you on what you do.
Very good question. I was going to try and touch on that, but I didn't want to hog all the time from these two guys. Yes, the merger is in the works. Northwestern Energy is the 4th smallest investor-owned utility in the United States. Black Hills, I believe, is either the 6th or 7th smallest utility in the United States. We've got a market cap of about $3.6 billion. Black Hills market cap is roughly $7.3 billion. So it is definitely, and it is a merger. It is not an acquisition. There will be a new company name. There will be a new ticker symbol for Wall Street. Northwestern will still run as Northwestern in Montana, in South Dakota. Black Hills will still run as Black Hills in the, how many states do they have, Greg? 8 states. So you won't see any difference. The trucks will all say Northwestern. I'll be retired before that happens, so my paycheck won't say Northwestern on it anymore. But yes, we do have a large number of institutional investors that own Northwestern stock, and that does include BlackRock. BlackRock does not get involved in the decisions made in the boardroom. They do not have anybody on our board of directors, and I don't believe they have anybody on Black Hills board of directors. Any investment that I've got in Northwestern is through some of the various other, I mean, it's all, what do you call that thing?
Mutual funds?
Mutual funds. So, but I do get notices from the mutual funds on voting on various things, annual meetings, so on and so forth. I do not exercise those proxies. I am not a financial wizard. But I know I've heard a lot of discussion on BlackRock. They have not interfered with our business dealings one iota. Matter of fact, they bought more shares of Northwestern when we announced the Cold Strip acquisition. So that made me feel a little bit better. But as far as proxy voting at board meetings, I leave it up to the people that know the financial background on that. And I've done pretty well, I think. That answer your question?
It was more geared to the institutional investors are the majority stockholders, so how much direction do you take from your stockholders, which are the institutional investors?
You know, I just haven't heard anybody, our board of directors, getting any flack from institutional investors. Brian Bird, he's the CEO of the company. Crystal Lale is the chief financial officer. Those are two very strong people, and I definitely trust both of those. Matter of fact, Brian will be the CEO of the new merged company, and Crystal Lale will be the chief financial officer of the new merged company as well. But I just haven't heard anything from our management that we've got any issues with institutional investors pushing us towards the Green New Deal, for lack of a better term. It's expected the merger should be completed, I'd say probably within another year. I think we're going to run into some issues with the Montana Public Service Commission. I think if we have anybody that's going to think they can run a utility better than our board of directors, it's the Montana Public Service Commission. How's that, Jeff?
Well, you open the door. Sometimes I wonder what you think. So Alan, on my campaign trail, one of the biggest things that I keep hearing people talk about and questions on is AI centers. And I wanted you to at least give Northwestern's perspective on what you perceive, how that's shaking out. For instance, I've heard of closed loop cooling, and I've heard of major cooling from, causing all kinds of water problems and shortages. The other thing is, I feel like if they're going to use a lot of power, they should be pay to play type thing. They should pay their fair share instead of having mom and pa or grandma and grandpa at the end of the line pick up the cost for overage on whatever they use for consumption. And the third thing is that they don't know exactly when, but we know that it's going to probably be coming. What's Northwestern's kind of can you give me a nutshell on some of that stuff?
Jeff, and that's a good question. That's a question I get a lot. Like I said, we do believe in pay to play. We will not subsidize data centers with residential ratepayers or commercial. We're in the process of submitting a large load tariff to the Public Service Commission. But here's another issue with the Public Service Commission. They have no time frames in which to adopt that large tariff. So that kind of goes back to an issue we had here a few months ago when we turned in a request for interim rates. The Public Service Commission has 90 days to review and either give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down. They did not do that in 90 days. And because the Public Service Commission violated the law, then we initiated our interim rates, which the law allows. And right after we did that, we cut those interim rates in half. Even as much as the Public Service Commission likes to take the credit for knocking those interim rates down, the company did that on their own. The PSC needs to have their feet held to the fire and follow the law. When we went through the go-around with the fire mitigation plan, which the PSC either had to approve or identify any deficiencies, there was a 45-day comment period and then 60 days for them to initiate their findings. They had 5 months to hire a technical master to review the plan, and they put it off till the final weeks when they had to do it. And one of the commissioners asked commission staff, do we have to follow these statutory timeframes? And the commission staff member says, well, we've ignored them in the past. So those are the issues you're going to be looking at when you get up there. Is the PSC going to approve a large load tariff? We need that large load tariff so we don't pass those costs down.
Well, that's a pretty good answer. So, and I really appreciate your comment when I get up there. But
when you get up there, you and I won't be able to talk anymore because that's called ex parte communications.
Well, when we get up there, we don't talk anyhow. So. But no, thanks for that. And honestly, of course, I don't have any say what they do. I call in every once in a while to try to give some advice, but it's not really taken very well either. But so the other thing that I wanted to kind of talk to you about is transmission lines. We've talked a little bit before, since we could on there. I know a couple of commissioners were talking about some carbon fiber core transmission lines. And I'm just wondering, is that a possibility? Do you think that for efficiency, and I know you guys were talking about fire mitigation, and I did look on some maps to see if there was carbon fiber core transmission lines, if it was corresponding with any fire, and I couldn't really find anything that was with that type of transmission line. Is that something that Northwestern would be open to in the future, or do you have some I know already, but how much more of that do you think would be viable for not only fire mitigation, but efficiency and some other cost savings?
God, Jeff, you pay attention. I got to admit that. Advanced conductor, we do a lot of discussion about advanced conductor. When we have to rebuild any large sections of transmission, we do use advanced conductor. To totally replace our transmission and distribution system with advanced conductor, the price tag on that would be $10.8 billion. And the commissioner that's pushing that, I asked him, I said, are you going to allow us to put that into the rate base? And he just stuttered. The purpose behind, his purpose behind the advanced conductor is it reduces line loss. And if I remember this correctly, on our transmission system, our line loss runs about 3.4%. On our distribution system, about 3.8%. And he's got it stuck in his head that we could reduce that line loss by 40%. Well, it's not. It's 40% of the 3.8 and so on and so forth. But that is very, very expensive. But we do use it when the need arises.
Thank you for your opinion.
What's the cheapest form of energy that we have today? Is that coal?
Hydro.
Hydro.
Coal second. Wind and solar are considerably more expensive because when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, then we've got to bring on backup generation or resort to the markets. And when it's cold, like it was it last week or the week before, we had some below zero weather. There was no wind and no solar. And we had our thermal units running at capacity, but we still had to buy power on the market. We still got to buy power on the market regardless. A couple of years ago, when we had 4 days of 20 below, that power we were buying to make up for the wind and solar that didn't work on $1,000 a megawatt. And there again, we had to fight with the PSC on that too.
So what does, when the windmills are not turning, or when they're turning, does Colstrip have to shut down to accommodate them?
No. No, that is primarily the purpose of day gates to balance load. We do that quite a bit with the Laurel plant to balance load. On the days when the wind is blowing like a banshee, and we get more power than we need, then that power is sold on the market. But those are usually days when market prices are cheap.
After you had your 50% rate decrease in the interim, what is the actual percentage of increase that you got to the interim deal?
I believe it was about 4.5%.
Is that a month or a year?
That's a year.
And 9% on natural gas, is that right?
I couldn't tell you on natural gas off the top of my head. Natural gas prices fluctuate pretty wildly, and that comes through. Greg, help me. What's PCAM stand for?
Power cost adjustment mechanism.
We're not allowed. We do not make any money on natural gas. We buy that on the market, and that's just a pass through to the consumer. Any electricity we buy on the market, we're not allowed to make any money on that. That's just a pass through to the consumer.
So then the 4% was actually what? Services?
Services, upkeep, maintenance, and you got to keep in mind that covered almost 2 years, so it was well below the price of inflation.
Thank you.
So I got a question for a nuclear guy. So with the spent fuel from the nuclear reactors, I know right now that it's not that big of a concern. We don't generate that much power using nuclear. But in the future, it seems like we're going towards more nuclear power. And I'm wondering, are we going to invest in something like the French or the Russian recycling of the nuclear fuel rods?
Yeah, I hope we do. Right now, every time I talk to somebody in that field of expertise, the argument goes towards economics. The technology is there to recycle the fuel. We have the spent fuel to go and recycle the fuel, but right now it's cheaper to mine uranium out of the ground and refine it. But we're going to get to that point where they're going to have to start recycling it. I hope that they do it quicker. I equate it to that FOAC versus NOAC. You know, it's a first of a kind, and so it's kind of expensive to do, but we got the technology to do it, and the more you do it, the cheaper it's going to get, the better you're going to get at it. So I'd like to see them starting to do it sooner rather than later.
Greg, question for you on water usage on these new SMRs. What's the water usage on those relative to the earlier generation facilities?
Yeah, so one of the things that why we're looking at the Gen 4s, some of those, the liquid metal fast reactors are liquid cooled, or the molten salt cooled, or the helium cooled. You can actually get the some of those where they don't use water for cooling at all. The water that those plants use are for running office buildings, sinks and toilets and kitchens, and the reactor itself doesn't use any. So it's about how you want to fit it in there. With that, a lot of it use, like the X energy will use an air cooling, but there's a parasitic load with that, so then you got to size it correctly. You got to work through all those technologies. So you can get them to where the water usage is very minimal.
So that would enable more flexibility on location of the smaller units.
Yes, it would.
Is it feasible to have the little nuclear plants that are like the size of a semi-trailer? Is that the most economical use where you could locate it, put it in different locations and not have to have distribution systems?
Yeah, so what you're talking about is a micro reactor, and they do got small enough to where they can fit on a semi. As a matter of fact, I mean, think about what the Navy's been doing for years. They got nuclear reactors running their submarines and in their aircraft carriers, and they're smaller units. The aircraft carrier ones are bigger, I know, but the submarines are a lot smaller. And it all comes down to how you want to use it. It's an economics of scale. So if we were to use it from a distributed generation type source, where you can go put it at the end of the line and feed back into the system on there, I don't know exactly how the economics would work out on that. Again, it goes back to that, just the right fit. Where's the right place to put it? We already got an infrastructure that's set up that does the point A to point B on there, but we've had a lot of discussions, and I like the idea of putting some of them smaller generators, the 50 megawatts or so, where your source load is, to alleviate needs on the transmission system. So if you think about, if you went to put, you know, some of these reactors in some of the bigger cities, you know, outside to where you could fit in, you're removing how many megawatts off of the transmission system that has to flow across.
And that would also help with be safer, wouldn't it? You know, we always are concerned about somebody knocking our transmission lines or terrorists or whatever, but if we had one in Miles City, we could operate here, and they might not be able to operate someplace else, so and then we would have transmission lines all over the place.
Yeah, it would be almost like a cloud type area where you'd be set up with different nodes. And I mean, safety standpoint, I don't know where the safety would come into, but you definitely have a leg up on reliability in there when you have it right by your load.
I've got a question to Northwest Energy. It's two different questions. The first one has to do with, initially, Ellen, you had mentioned you might have to sell off that 370 capacity that you have at Colstrip. Can you explain, because then later on you said we didn't have enough power and we had to buy market rates, which were much higher. Can you explain why that is, that we're not able to use that excess capacity that you mentioned earlier? And then the other part of the question is, we've had lots of rate hikes from your company, several in the last 4 years. And so the rate payer, we're not seeing our cost savings on that. And so, not to say that they're not there, we're just not seeing it, or maybe it's a communication issue. Can you expound on both of those?
Okay, on the first part of your question, we won't take delivery of that additional cold strip availability until after January 1st of 26. That still belongs to Puget and Avista, and the reason they're getting rid of it is because the Public Service Commission in Washington and Oregon said they can't have any coal-fired generation.
Well.
Jeff, you're just fun to pick on.
I know. I love you too.
And I am not aware of multiple rate increases over the last several years. We had one 2 years ago, general rate case that covered a 4-year period of time. And we just had this last one that covered the last 2 years. You were
2022 and 2024.
Yeah.
The two that I know.
Yeah, those are the 2022.
You're asking for one again right now, right?
That's the 2022 one.
Okay, so you're saying that we had one in 2023 and one in 2024, and you're revisiting the 2022 request?
No, the
now?
2024. It was filed in 2024.
Okay.
Nobody's ever accused the Public Service Commission of being a speed demon.
Okay, so it's the same one from 2024 that's up for a vote right now?
Yes,
Okay, but there was one in 2023 as well?
2022.
Or 2022? Okay, are there cost savings that we should be seeing as ratepayers with new efficiency for the investments that you guys are making? What should we see?
I think it's just like everything else. I would not expect to see prices going down. I mean, the cost of business is going up, the cost of money is going up. I mean, we could have gotten by pretty good, like on that Laurel plant when it was first brought up. But then the cost of money went up, the cost of litigation went up, the cost of materials went up, because when that plan was first proposed, we did not anticipate COVID, according to the PSC staff. We should have accounted for that, so we're being disallowed those costs. But the Laurel plant, that would have been a wash if that plant would have been online when it was originally scheduled to come online, because we wouldn't have had to buy excess power on the market. So as we work through things, we try. We try and see ahead, see where prices are going. That Laurel plant it's imperative that we get that, because power prices are going up everywhere. We've got a lot of independent power producers want to get in and serve. We went through, I was on Governor Bullock's Climate Council here a number of years ago with the shutdown of coal strip units 1 and 2, correct. Boardman in Oregon, Centralia in Washington will be shut down at the end of this year. We're looking at a 26% of grid failure. We need baseload generation to firm up the grid. And new generation will cost money. But it's still considerably better than where we see where markets are going to go. Because if we got to buy power on the market, we're going to be competing with data centers as well. And that's what you're seeing on the East Coast. When you get over into the PGM markets over on the East Coast, I mean, they shut off a lot of baseload generation, fossil fuel fired, replaced it with wind. When you bring on new generation, you depreciate it out, but the depreciation is paid for on your power bill. Well, that's the hope that, yes, it'll go up, but it's not going to go up as much as it would if we didn't have that generation asset. Because we're not gonna be competing with data centers. We're not gonna be competing with other large loads. I know, it's tough. But I tell you what, I like my Northwestern bill in Helen a whole lot more than I like my Fergus Electric bill in Roundup.
So Alan, got a question for you. Oh, you can answer him over here? Okay.
I was just gonna really quick
Yep.
explain one
And
thing.
then I got a
So,
question for
yeah,
you.
I don't know if this helps at all with it, and I'm kind of stepping out of my swim lane, but it's the way I describe it to friends and family who ask that same question. I mean, prior to 2022 rate case, how long was it before we were in one? Was it 10 years?
I think it's 8.
8 years? So what they did, and you're not going to see the Allen's point of rate case where it comes in and we drop a rate. What it is when you ask about efficiency gains and savings that you see, we're operating for 8 years, and you know what? Cost of labor, cost of materials, cost of everything goes up in there. When you're able to continue operating at let's just say a 2012 rate, up until 2020, 2021, that's where those savings are. That's where those efficiency gains are, is you're able to operate for upwards of 8-10 years on a rate that was established several years prior. And then we all saw what happened with inflation 2020 through 2024. That's some of the highest we had in there, and so that's what triggered off a couple of those last rates. Does that make sense? Kind of the way that I explained it.
No, Greg, that's right, but that's one of the other things, one of the things that would be nice about the merger as well, will be a bigger company. The cost of money should drop. We won't be at the bottom of the list when it comes time to buy poles, wire, turbines. We should be able to get a better price. I mean, it's like any other business. If you've got the size to back you up, you get a little better treatment. Jeff?
Alan? So, how do I frame this question?
I don't know.
It's a statement and a question on that. I mean, I understand where Northwestern's at. You guys are, you're a model company that you gotta make, try to make profits for your shareholders and stuff. But, you know, as a person out here too, and I'm a ratepayer, so safe, reliable, efficient, those are some things that I really feel is like a big deal. And I'm not saying that you guys don't do it, but, you know, we had a 17% increase in our rate here not too long ago. And, you know, granted that maybe Northwestern felt like that was a prudent thing to do. Some of us were like, that's a lot, you know. But when you talk about costs and stuff, and maybe this was for your partner there too, you've been talking like a lot of nuclear. So, and I think that's probably going to be a wave of the future. How long? Maybe 9 years? I don't know how long is it going to take. And then, you know, cost efficiencies. Like you said, hydro, we've had that for years and years and years. And coal, we could probably be doing more burning coal, but environmental concerns and politics, whatever, keep some of that stuff out of the rate thing. So if you're going to come in for a long-term analysis on whatever, on nuclear, what's the cost of that, and how soon could we have an SMR, was it SRM or whatever, coming through this whole thing there? I mean, because I'm probably going to figure that out later, but I just thought maybe some people here, since we've been talking a lot about it, that'd be a relevant question maybe for you.
So you were asking when and how much?
Yeah.
To boil it down simply, I don't see it coming for at least a decade. And the reason why I say that is, I was talking about the nth of a kind efficiencies. When you build a plant, you work up a revenue requirement, right? The cost of your fixed prices and your variable prices of operating it, and you got to get it to where it's competitive price. What's reasonable for people to pay? What is it on the market? What would it be to operate this thing? And you got to be able to operate that thing in order to be able to pay for that investment. So it's kind of my roundabout way of answering the question. The costs are still getting ironed out. We're paying attention to that. We're looking at that. But one way to control that is figuring out, you know, how do you work through with developers, other owners, and financiers to set it up to where you can get that variable cost and that fixed cost to a point where your revenue requirement, when you start running that plant, selling the electricity from it, is competitive with all other markets. Because when I talk about this stuff, I talk about affordability, reliability, and sustainability. If we can't check off the affordability, if we can't enter into it and say, okay, our revenue requirement on this plant we're going to go build is going to be X dollars per megawatt hour, that's unacceptable, we're not going to move forward with it. So that's why I say at least 10 years before we probably even really see some good traction, because I'm guessing it's going to take that long for a lot of these vendors to get to an nth of a kind of efficiency on building these things.
So really, you don't have a, so really you don't have a solid answer, but I mean, like I said, I like the idea and the concept, and I think everybody in here thinks it's kind of a cool idea, most of us anyhow, but I'm just wondering, so you're talking like a decade, 10 years down the road, and then who can look down the road that far and tell with any certainty what costs are, or politics or anything else that could come possibly through there, so I appreciate your answer, but I mean, those are some things that, you know, I had my hopes up when you were talking there. I said, man, this is cool. I got some land you could put one on, you know, or something, but anyhow.
I wish it went faster. I just myself don't see it going that much faster, especially when you take a look at it, you got 130 different vendors out there. And I was doing a panel with a professor from Montana Tech, and we were talking about the France model. France has one kind of nuclear reactor and 30 kinds of cheese. And America has one kind of cheese and 30 different nuclear reactors. So the challenge of getting to that end of the kind is going to be pretty large.
Thank you.
And another, go ahead, Bob. This goes back to some of the other expenses that were incurred with, and I'll touch on the tax question again. We pay almost as much in taxes as what we pay out in dividends to our stockholders. In South Dakota, the tax portion of a Northwestern power bill in South Dakota makes up 2% of the bill. Here this last year, it was 10% in Montana, and that's going to go up. And that is a pass-through by statute, going back to deregulation, when Montana Power was told to unbundle the utility bill, transmission, distribution, taxes, and energy. And the PSC has to approve that.
I'm not there yet, but it'll happen.
Bob?
Thank you. Jason, this is for you. I want you to wake up.
I just look like I was sleeping.
Do you work with at Coal Strip?
Traditionally I have over the years. I'm doing something slightly different right now, but yeah, off and on for.
Well, you're representing coal, so I just was curious, do you think that there's ever a chance that we're gonna get any more coal generation?
Well, interestingly enough, my thought on the whole process would be there'd be probably a 20-year lull before we started seeing new coal-fired generation, right? Well, 3 weeks ago, I think it's been about 3 weeks, Wyoming put in for a new permit for a coal-fired generation plant. So we may be starting to see a little change in wind already. Who knows? But I think it'll be back. It just when it comes back, we'll probably see a different set of rules for it. I mean, it's been a highly regulated business for a long, long time, you know. And I'm pretty sure there'll be some more regulations stacked on top of it before we see the next go round. But you know, 6 in one, half a dozen the other. It is reliable. We have the technology. I would think this next go round we'll just see more efficient boilers. We'll see cleaner burns. We'll see utilization of byproducts. Probably get rid of some of the issues that we've had in the past. And then, if and when that does occur, I would imagine some of the other, all the above energies that people are pushing right now. And once again, I went back to the point where You know, sometimes I feel like if we just stuck with what we had, you know, we wouldn't be paying $300 a month power payments for a studio apartment, stuff like that. Or when you take your livestock heater on, it's not gonna run you $2,000 a month. You know, that was pushed by different groups and different entities to make the cost of generation go high enough that, you know, we're paying for it. But oddly enough, we did have to mature in the market and utilize some other energy sources too. I mean, even though, so right now, if you're looking across the globe, petroleum is still 60% of the energy market globally. 2025, spring of 25 is the first time ever that coal was unseated as the #1 energy source in the world. And it took 3 different entities to unseat it: solar, wind, and hydro. As a combined, finally took over globally electrical generation, only by like 1%. So I would think in the future, we're probably going to suffer through some failures. We're probably going to run your utility bills up where it breaks you to try to pay one every month, and then we'll go back to where we were.
Well, that's a good question. And we've already got in law in Montana that prohibits Northwestern from building any new coal-fired generation unless they capture and sequester 50% of the carbon. So that might be an idea if you want to put in a bill. But, you know, along with that comes the regulatory risk. And would we be willing to take that regulatory risk, get halfway through construction on a power plant, and we have a judge say the permit is no good, just like we did with Laurel, or we get a federal administration that denies it as well. I mean, there's regulatory risk in everything we do, whether it's generation or transmission. We run into issues on distribution lines. Everybody wants power, but you don't run a power line across my place. That's some of the regulatory risks that we face every day.
Hey, Alan, did you say that there was a possibility that the shares from Puget Sound and Avista wouldn't happen?
Well, they're going to happen. It's going to all depend on, there again, the people I like to pick on the most are the Public Service Commission. They're hiring a law firm to get involved in our application to Federal Energy Regulatory Commission on the Puget section of that, because we can't use it right now. What we did, we set up a subsidiary company that would take possession of that share of coal strip, because we got to have a market for that power. We can't eat the cost, because that is parts of coal strip units 3 and 4. So if there's no revenue coming in from that, somebody's got to pick up the cost. And right now, the PSC staff has recommended that the Public Service Commission hire an attorney and get involved in this case, which could drag it out months.
So on the large load tariffs, is there a projected income? Can you explain a little bit why you need to do that?
We need to do the large load tariffs, so the large loads like data centers are not subsidized by lower rates or lower classifications of customer. We do not want to saddle residential ratepayers with the power needs, the transmission needs of a data center. There again, it goes back to pay to play.
Sure. And then one more question with the merger is, so you said basically you guys are merging, but you're still going to, the companies will operate the same way. Will that be, the CBAs and the labor standards, are they going to follow that too, the way they are with Northwest Energy right now?
You know, that's a discussion we've had a lot of thought on how that works out. I mean, we can't unilaterally change a contract. And believe me, the labor has got a lot of support from Northwestern Energy.
Sure.
They do. They're good, qualified people. We appreciate them. They do us a good job. And we will do everything we can to keep those guys safe.
That's all I got. Thank you.
I'm just wondering about AI data centers is what my concern is. From some of the statistics and so forth that I've been reading, 5,400, they say, data centers are now in the United States. And it's talking about how much water it takes to cool them and how much electricity too. Water for cooling data centers is just a fraction of AI's true water footprint. A 2021 research paper from Virginia Tech and the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory found that 75% of data centers' water impact is from electricity generation. More than 50% of this electricity is fossil fuel derived, created by steam in generating power plants that added up to 200 plus billion gallons of indirect water consumption by data centers in a 2023 per federal report. And so there's the water line there. And then tech companies are making bold pledges to rebalance the scales of their water consumption, even as they continue to build data centers in water-stressed regions. Yet for some of the biggest names like Google and Microsoft, water use continues to increase year over year, reaching billions of gallons annually. Considering that just 3% of this water is fresh and only about 0.5% is safe and accessible for human use, with much of the U.S. already experiencing long-term drought, perhaps it's worth considering, about AI, and then also this little bit about 40% of U.S. data centers are in regions classified as extremely high water scarcity by the nonprofit World Resources Institute. The companies with the heaviest footprint in these areas are Amazon with 81 and Microsoft with 23, while Meta and Google each have 9. Meanwhile, Arizona, which has been in an extended drought since the 90s, is one of the country's leading data center markets. And so just wondering, how is that going to fit into what we are doing here in Montana? Is it going to be, do we have any or many of them here now? Are they possibly going to be using a lot of electricity to generate the power or water consumption too that will affect individual people?
There are, I believe, a couple small data centers. Most of it's for Bitcoin mining, isn't it, Greg? But I think that would be a good question for the people that want to build the data centers. I can't answer for them. Greg, you want to answer for that? But I think that would be I can get Greg some contacts for some data center people. Yeah. There's a lot of proposals. Beowulf, who has the Harding power plant, but that's a power plant that's been in existence for quite a while. But I think it'd be probably good if you guys could get some data center people in there. I just don't feel comfortable talking for them. On the power side, that's a little bit different, but
So I am not a data center person, but I've been in front of quite a few of them. There's 6 or 7 proposed in state right now, 2 operational. So cut that number back to 5, I guess. So probably 5 more proposals left over. Now, as far as utilization of groundwater goes, no different than, let's say, a power plant, whether it be coal fire, gas fire, or anything else that we would traditionally work at. There are different systems that can be set in place to mitigate the loss of water. So one of the primary concerns everybody does have is water utilization, right? Just as you asked. These data centers, when you put the agreements in place, if they're crafted to make sure that they use best practice with water utilization, which would be, say, a closed loop system, the water consumption at that point would become negligible. So there are things in place, and this is the other thing too. They don't have to cool a data center with water. They can also utilize fans, industrial fans, overhead. But water is the most efficient. But going back to your question, if they're to utilize best practices that they've been using elsewhere in the country and use closed loop systems, we will not be losing a bunch of water.
Folks, I think we'll call it a night. We're gonna kind of hang around here for a while, and if you have any questions for the panel, you can just catch them. But thank you for coming, and it was a good one. So appreciate it.
Thank you.